My name is Sylvan J. Rahman. Welcome back to Intentional Wealth. In today's video, I want to talk to you about something that you never really hear any entrepreneurs ever talk about. And yet it's something that affects us all. And when I say all of us, I don't mean just entrepreneurs and investors. I'm talking about every single person on this planet. Before we get into that, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified every time we release new content. In the past few weeks, while staying at home and going through this difficult time that all of us are going through, it has actually given me time to think about the past few years of my life in regards to my businesses. And in particularly just seeing how my life has turned out and how going ahead and taking action and getting involved in my businesses has actually helped my life grow, and it's turned out in ways that I would have never thought possible. Now, one thought that I keep coming back to is I should have started earlier. See, in 2017, as most of you all know, that is when I finally decided to take the plunge and get into real estate investing full time. And this is when I told myself that no matter what, this is what I'm gonna focus on. This is what I'm gonna do, unless for some reason something doesn't work out. And I actually gave myself a time frame of 5 years and a goal to hit in those 5 years. What you don't know is that this decision was 10 years in the making. We have to rewind back to 2007. I was actually a few months shy of getting out of the military. And I knew I didn't want to work for anybody. I wanted to start my own business. I just didn't know what that was. I had no clue what I was gonna do as far as starting my own business. I just knew I wanted to start one. Well, I had so many leave days left, so I decided to take a vacation to India. In the first week, I decided to go meet a friend of mine. I drove from my town to his town 2 hours. And when I met with him, I decided to ask him if it was possible if he could accompany me to this beach resort town in India called Goa that I had never been to. He immediately gets on his laptop and he starts looking for tickets to go to Goa. So I'm thinking, oh, this is something that he's gonna call into work or whatever, and he's gonna have to make some arrangements. Turns out that he had found a ticket for us leaving that night on a train. I was a little surprised and shocked by how fast he was able to do this, and that he was able to just kind of leave for a few days without telling anybody except his wife. The other part about this is the train actually left from my town, so we had to drive all the way back to my town and take an overnight train that got to Goa the next day. As we're driving back 2 hours to my town, we start talking about what he's doing. And he's told me that he's kind of divested most of his businesses and he's focusing on real estate. And it got me interested and I was a little intrigued. So now we're standing on the train platform and he's telling me that he had read a book and that I have to read it no matter what, that this book is going to change my mindset. And so imagine this, there's this little bookstall on this train platform and that book just happens to be for sale. So he buys me a copy of this book and it literally changed my life. So all throughout the night during this train ride, I'm reading this book, hardly got any sleep, and by the time we reached Goa the next morning, I was hooked. I decided this is what I want to do. I want to do real estate investing. Now you're probably asking, Sylvan, what is that book? Well, it's actually a book that my mom recommended that I read 10 years ago, but I was thinking to myself, what does my mom know about a book? And I'm not gonna read any book that my mom wants to recommend to me. Well, that book is none other than Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, I highly recommend that you read that book if you've ever thought about doing some type of investing or starting your own business, because I think it's a great book. It is not a book that is necessarily gonna teach you how to do things, but it's a good book for beginners to have that change of mindset, to kind of get you interested in the entrepreneur mindset. And actually to this day, since my friend bought me a copy, I actually offer to buy people copies of this book. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily buy you a copy, but go ahead and comment down below if you've read the book and if you actually like the book and what you think about the book. Now you're probably thinking, well, if you read this book in 2007 and that's when you made the decision. What took you so long? Well, I was busy, really, really busy. I got my pilot's license. I tried to go back to school. I tried to work for my parents and maybe take over their business. And there was a whole host of other things that I got busy with. Now that I'm looking back on those 10 years of my life, I realize that those were all excuses, and it boiled down to one thing. And this is the thing that we all struggle with. That one thing is fear. Fear is the number one killer of all of our dreams and aspirations. If we always choose that emotion, it's something I still struggle with, but there's another side to fear that I choose to live through. During those 10 years, I was living in this type of fear where every time I would face a challenging situation, I would run. That type of fear is basically what I like to call forget everything and run. Now, the second type of fear that I'm living in today is what I like to call face everything and rise. So you have those 10 years that I was living in and distracting myself and living in that fear of forget everything and run. Now I find myself looking at fear, but looking at it through a different lens. Face everything and rise. See, the problem is most of us were taught that whatever happens in our life, we're only in control of 10% of it, and 90% of it just happens to us. I would actually like you to think that 90% of life is what we control. The other 10% is what happens to us. Like right now, you can choose to stay at home. You can control that. If you're fortunate enough to be able to stay at home and still do your work and get paid, that's something you can choose to do. And we're all facing challenges right now, especially during this pandemic. But we still have a lot of control over our life to keep us safe. In 1954, an American psychologist, Julian Rotter, introduced a new concept called the locus of control. The idea is when you start believing that you have control over the outcome of what happens in your life, rather than believing that this outcome is related to outside factors that are out of your control, your life will get noticeably better. One thing can be used to make you feel in control over what happens, and that is a bias towards action. So what does that mean? It means that if you actually believe that you have more control over your life and the outcome of your life, then it actually changes your mindset to believe in a more action-oriented behavior. When facing a challenging situation, most of us have this feeling that we have to do something, that we have to take action. But then we have this moment of hesitation. Mel Robbins, in her book, The 5-Second Rule, actually calls this moment between feeling like you have to do something and hesitating the kiss of death. Because that is when we let that first type of fear set in. Now, when we are able to manage this moment, the kiss of death, and actually work past it and take action and do the things that we actually want to do, we actually start to notice that our lives actually start to change for the better. This forget everything and run type of fear turns what is already hard into something extremely difficult. Let me give you a real example from my own life where I've still been living my life in this first type of fear. So years ago, I went through some personal hardships and I let my credit score crash. And I just didn't care. Now, over the last few years, even before I made the decision to get into real estate, I've been slowly doing everything I can the right way to make sure that I'm building my credit and stuff like that. But over the last few years, I've actually learned and heard about these tricks and tips that you can do to actually raise your credit score much faster. But I didn't want to. I wanted to have a good credit score, but I was fearful of just taking action on it. So in the last month, I finally said, you know what? I gotta go ahead and take action on this one little part of my life. Well, I decided to do something about it. And my credit score has actually jumped, I think 30 to 50 points. I can confidently say now that I'm in the low 700s. Or at least now I'm in the 700 range. There is this sense of relief that, okay, I've done something towards it. Now that doesn't mean that I just stop there, but it's made the process easier, and so I just keep taking action towards it until I get my credit to where it should be, at a higher score. American author Seth Godin once said that when we think about what's possible instead of what's required, a different part of our brain operates. This is also true about courage, seeing the solution rather than the problem. Seeing the final outcome rather than focusing on the fear of the process will force the brain to switch its way of thinking into something good, something that you will look forward to achieving no matter what it takes. When I look back on the last 3 years of my life, I realize that this is the face everything and rise type of fear that I've been living my life through. See, 3 years ago, when I first started on this journey, I had this vision for my life. And for me, I was going to do anything to get to that destination, to see that vision to fruition. Now, on this journey of mine, I've definitely stumbled, I've fallen, and I've even had to take steps back. But I've always picked myself up and taken another step towards my goal. When I started out on this journey of mine, I knew that things would get hard, but I never realized this one thing, how lonely it would get, even with the support of your close family and friends and your business partners. There are times where it still gets lonely. This is what I have to do when times get rough for me. I have to remember my why, remember what my vision was, and take action towards my journey. And this is what I implore you to do. We all have our own journeys, and things get hard, things get difficult, we get fearful, we hesitate, we start to have self-doubt, and we let bad thoughts creep in. No matter how big or how small the step you take on your journey for every single day that you're on this, you have to take a step. And eventually you get to this place where you realize that you've come further than you've ever thought you would. If you like what you've seen here today, go ahead and comment down below what you're fearful about. And if you've read any of these books that I've talked about, go ahead and comment about what you like, what you don't like. Let's have a dialogue. Please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we'll see you next week.